I saw a tweet that said that children today do not understand the difference between criticism and instruction. And I immediately took it as a critique on today's generation of children because there's been so much said publicly and in the media in the last few weeks by coaches about this generation and all their failings. But as I thought about it more, to me it's really a criticism of coaches because if players are unable to differentiate between criticism and instruction, we're probably doing something wrong with our instruction. And I see this over and over when I go to games and I watch other coaches and I watch teams and I watch, the way that players react to coaches and the way the parents speak to players, the way, during games and after the games. And what I see is a lot of criticism and not a lot of instruction. And I'm pretty confident that I understand the difference between criticism and instruction, especially when it's not directed towards me, when I'm a third party just observing. And most of what I see is criticism. So, a player makes a bad pass and, the coach is yelling and screaming, or the most frequent reaction, especially in basketball, is, pointing at the bench, go get her, go get him, get him out of there. And literally, that's how I hear coaches speak. Get him out of there. One bad play, one turnover or one missed shot, and it's, get him out of there. That's enough, And then the player comes to the bench, and the coach isn't instructing. He, points at the player or yells at the player or something of that nature. The other common feedback or communication between coaches and players that I hear is simply play harder, which tends to be the solution to any problem from a coach standpoint. Is just play harder, play harder. You guys need to go out there and play harder, which isn't instruction. It's not criticism necessarily. It could maybe be more motivation, but it's certainly not instruction. You're not, really giving or helping the players to find solutions to whatever the problem is. You're just blaming it on a lack of effort, which may or may not be the case. I don't see a ton of games where I really think that one team's beating the other because of, lack of effort. A lot of times it's simply a skill difference at the high school level. But then sometimes with the better teams, it tends to be an execution difference, or decision making or shot selection, things of this nature. It's rare that I really think, at least until the game's been decided, well, this team's really outworking the other team. It happens, but I think typically the differences are skill related and then execution related and then probably effort related. But the answers are always play harder, play harder, play harder, which isn't really instruction. So again, I saw this tweet and I immediately reacted and said, I don't think coaches understand the difference either. And the more that I watch coaches interact with their players, I think that coaches have confused the difference between criticism and instruction. And I think more coaches need to spend more time with their instruction and giving feedback. And what went wrong and how can we fix that so it doesn't happen again. Whether that happens as soon as you take the player out and you give that have that conversation, or whether it happens at halftime or at the end of the game, or whether that's what you do at the beginning of the next practice. Okay, so this happened. All right, so what did you see? Here's what I saw. Okay, how can we fix this the next time so we don't have the same mistake? And that's how we can get more instruction and get over just criticizing players. Do this better, do that right, you didn't do this, don't pass it there, why'd you do that? Those are the comments that I hear most often, and none of that is instruction. It is simply criticism. And so coaches can lament that players don't understand the difference between criticism and instruction because they believe that maybe players today have soft skins and they can't take a lot of yelling or whatever it is, whatever the perception is of the problems that kind of supports tweets like this. But I think the problem more so is the inability of coaches to instruct and the manner in which that we communicate. And that doesn't mean that yelling is inappropriate. Sometimes you have to yell. Sometimes you have to yell to get a player's attention. I'm not talking necessarily about the volume of the coach. But I do think that if we see a problem that players aren't responding to instruction and we feel that it is instruction, then we might need to take a look at our body language and our tone, because our body language and our tone is going to be perceived by that player even more so than the verbal instructions. And so if our body language and our tone is very negative, then the players may perceive instruction as criticism. And so maybe that's a problem with players, but maybe that's a problem with our style as a coach and our body language and our tone. And so before we complain about players or criticize players even more, we should look at ourselves and say, well, is our body language, how are we communicating with these players? What do I look like? What do I sound like? Could I lower my volume a little bit? Could I lower my posture a little bit? Do I need to be pointing at a player when I'm instructing? And if I can fix my body language, if I can fix my tone, maybe that player will hear the instruction as opposed to hearing the instruction as criticism. And that way we can get past, this idea that players, can't differentiate between criticism and instruction. And we can focus on our instruction and give that with good body language, good tone. And now the players understand that it is instruction. They can learn from it and they can use it going forward in their games.